I gave a talk a few years ago called Our Monsters Ourselves, and it was a contemplation of film, but it was very much like what we're talking about now, where I was using film in the 20th century to say, look at how the collective anxieties of a generation will be expressed in the kind of horror films that it makes and it consumes. Right. So after Hiroshima, we get God, the Godzilla myth, and it's a sudden anxiety about be careful what you wish for and be careful how far science goes. Jurassic Park is the new iteration of that fear. But then you get Psycho, and you have the appearance of the serial killer, and that runs all the way from the 60s to the 70s, and we're operating on a principle of evil there, that it's a pathology, it's a virus, it's a disease, it's something that you catch that can be cured through psychology or through medicine. At the end of every Halloween movie, you've got a psychiatrist popping out saying, don't hurt him. We can get him to the hospital and study him so that we can cure this.
Right.
And then what happens? That the apotheosis of that whole myth is in Scream, and is followed by, interestingly enough, our greatest vampire for my generation is Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah. Sure.
That is what he is. And then you get a new horror film. What's the one with Liv Tyler in it? Kale, The Strangers.
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah. And so that was what my talk was about. I was like, you can hop, skip, and a jump and look at these different Cabin in the Woods wants to trade on all of them, which is hilarious.
Right.
But and does so brilliantly. But every age in the interregnum. You'll get the pop-up of and zombies will have to be talked about, walkers, Walking Dead, because we're in that age now, and that does express a sort of collective fear. I'm interested to hear what you guys would say it's a fear of.
What, zombies?
Yes.
Okay,
can I add something? Yeah, let me. Can I hop in real quick?
Yeah, please. Yeah,
sure.
This
is kind of hilarious. Well, first of all, one thing I just want to get in really quick. It's not just our viewership that's the life force that is the vampires leeching off of. It's actually like ejaculation, sperm coming out of the body when the act, like that's kind of the end of the ritual, so to speak, or at least it's
I think that's right.
Yeah, it's kind of like the pinnacle of it, and then everything after sucks. And then it goes again. That's kind of how it works. But what I was gonna say is, like, your viewership's the battery, but also you're just giving up seed to waste. It's not going anywhere. It's not actually giving any life. And you actually start pushing yourself away from people that you're actually with, like my ex-wife. It destroys intimacy because you're giving your life force to this vampire
elsewhere.
Elsewhere.
Well, and yes, and the eroticism of the vampire too, in the 20th century and in the 21st century, look at what the actual physical act itself is. It's the vampire taking something away, not giving something to. I know that there's, in some of the myths, there's an intermingling of blood, but he's literally sucking it out of the victim. He's not giving something to. And so, Mac, your point is very well taken. I would also point out that, going back to the question of the ritual behavior that addicts go through, I wanted to ask, when you're at the point at which you're on the cusp of opening the door, I imagine that the psychological state that you're in is one of desire and remorse at the same time, which is precisely the opposite way that you would feel if you were a Catholic standing in line for communion. So it's again, it's a mockery and a perversion of everything that's associated with the good.
Great point. No, that totally makes sense. It's like you're in this gravitational field. You don't want to talk to anybody. Like, one time I remember, and this was, I actually documented my last relapse was last December. So I'm almost a year sober now. And I documented it in one of my podcasts. That one's Getting Back in the Ring. But I got to this state of mind where it just felt like I was captive. I have described it before talking to people, like almost like I am possessed. Like I am in this trance. Like I just can't stop it. I can't stop the momentum of this power that's coming towards me. But really, if you just take a second to just step outside of that and break free of it and to get help, to say a prayer, to get outside, that can be all you need to completely break the spell, for that moment. Obviously, you got to put in more work later to be less susceptible to it, but that's how you can break it. But really quick before I lose my train of thought, the other point I was thinking about as we were talking about movies. Okay, so let me this is gonna be interesting. I'm curious on how you guys are gonna react to this. But I remember like when I was in high school going into college, one of the movies that just took everyone by storm, mainly women, was Twilight, which was a vampire werewolf movie, but it's like a teen romance. And what that did, now that we're kind of talking about this and how there's reflections, that was around the time that smartphones became a thing. It was like 2008. That was like when I was a junior in high school.
2008 and 9. So the iPhone comes out in 2008, and 2009 is when it's fully activated with text messaging. So that's really about the time.
Yeah, and I'm gonna see when did Twilight.
It's right at that time, because it was
right around that time.
It was right in the immediate
2008.
it was right in the immediate aftermath of the last Harry Potter book.
Yeah, and
book.
And that's kind of interesting because I feel like at least like Harry Potter, the way that I remember it was just very wholesome, very black and white, like good and evil. And then Twilight comes out, and I just remembered. I did remember watching that with like my sisters or my cousins. We just go see it. Like I didn't care. I was like, this is kind of funny to me. But now you look back on it, it actually kind of made vampirism like sexy.
Of course.
And vampirism something that happens at a younger age when you're in high school. And that's something that strikes me a little bit, because when you look at Pornhub, there's some new laws coming into place where there's age verification laws where they're just pulling out of those states. They a lot of their traffic comes from underage users, minors.
Of course.
And I just couldn't help but just make that point about Twilight. It kind of just felt like that kind of lined up a little bit. Because
I think with a certain frame and a certain attitude, you can absolutely see those as sort of preparations for a kind of, because think about it, what it does, it's sort of making cool, alternatives and like, the woe is me stuff. I mean, it's so transparently affective in terms of what it's sort of priming you to do. And like, you're supposed to sort of feel deeply along with Bella and, in the whole thing. I think it's absolutely some kind of preparation for it. I mean, again, that I hope people understand. It's not pornography, right? But it's boy, it really starts running the line of like emotional porn, right? Which, as we know, is way more of a temptation for women and girls than it is for guys, right? And so there's this sort of this weird, it's differently valenced, I think.
Yeah, and just I think it just made me think about movies and how that started to become kind of popular again. I think with like the younger generation, almost like, you have the classics. I remember a few weeks ago watched the black and white Mummy, with Boris Karloff, and I just love that. There was something about that movie with his stare, that reminded me of probably the stare that I'm giving when I'm looking at porn.
Oh wow, that's really interesting.
It's just like this gaze.
Yeah.
Like you're just locked into it. But Matt, sorry if I derailed that a little bit.
No. I don't think you did at all, because the point I wanted to make about Twilight is notice, and Kale, you'll remember this from I think maybe, did you read Stirrings of Culture by any chance, Kale?
Who's
Gail Stroud. It was an institute book.
Yeah.
Okay, I ran into it when I was working on my master's at UD, and it's fascinating. But there was an essay in it called "Fat in the Female Body," and it was about body aesthetics through the ages, and how from the 70s forward, the Twiggy look hit. You remember this. By the time we were in the 90s, you and I commented, we're like, why is it that runway models all look